Welcome to AEC Stories. This is former SM-3 Dempsey of the USS Mount Hood. And today we've got a special guest, Dan Arnett, who was a Snipe. And we're going to hear his sea story. Welcome aboard, Dan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So you came to me through the Facebook page because you listened to one of the sea stories, right?
Yeah, I've been listening to the sea stories for, 6 months or so now. They're really interesting.
Yeah, you're from Indiana. I was wondering why I had so many listens out of there because it tells me who listens where.
Not really. Yeah, I don't know. I was looking in iTunes for anything to do with Navy, and you popped up. And I was actually riding my Harley. My daughter lives in Michigan, about 300 miles away, and I was riding up there. I was blasting you through the stereo full blast as I went down the highway.
That is so awesome. What a great visual.
Yeah.
Well, like me, like you searching for Navy podcasts, I was looking, and most of the stuff is either formal, like maybe some supplemental training for the current Navy, or it's just old, History Channel type stuff that doesn't really tell the person's story. And I was like, nobody's really doing this. I found a couple other guys. One guy's a CB who's got some good stories. And another guy does a submarine podcast. But the surface fleet was so much bigger. And I'm like, someone's going to tell our story. So here we are, right?
You know? Yeah, I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, no problem. So what year and what got you to join the Navy? When did you join, and what was your motivation when you were a young man?
Well, I think I always wanted to be in the military from the time I was real little. I was just always fascinated by anything military. I still am today. My Harley's an Army bike. But in 1981, 82, when I was in high school, the economy was really in the tank. There just weren't any jobs. And I knew I wasn't a college type. So I went to the Army recruiter. I was going to be like a tough guy, Green Beret or something.
Right.
And they sent me to take the ASVAB test, which I passed no problem. And then I go back, and the recruiter I'd been talking to had went on leave, and the new guy, first thing he says is, well, how many of your buddies are you going to bring in with you? And that just pissed me off. I thought, you're the recruiter. That's your job. So,
you thought you were signing up for Amway or something.
Yeah.
It's a pyramid scheme. No.
Really? Well, I walked out of there, and I had one uncle that had been in the military. He'd been in the Air Force. He was at Howard. He's a big Jewish guy from New York City. And he had been stationed just north of Kokomo. There was a SAC base back in the 60s, Grissom Air Force Base. He'd been stationed there, and he'd met my Aunt Patsy and got her in the family way.
Yeah.
So they ended up getting married, and he settled down here in Indiana. So I knew he'd been in the military, so I went to talk to him, and he tells me, he goes, well, my neighbor's son's a Navy recruiter. Why don't you go talk to Steve? So what the heck? Navy, that sounds all right. So I go in to talk to Steve, and first thing he asked me when I sat down is, well, what do you want to do when you get out? And I said, well, wait a minute. No, I'm talking about getting in, not getting out. He said, yeah, but the Navy's going to teach you a skill, something you can use the rest of your life. He said, what do you want that skill to be? And I said, well, I never thought of it that way before. So I said, well, I really enjoy my shop classes in high school. I like metal shop. So he pulls out this catalog that had every job in the Navy. And we start flipping through the engineering section, and we find machine repairman, MR. And I was like, yeah, it sounds like something I'd like to do. So he set me up to go down to Indianapolis to take the physical. I go down there and take the physical, and I pass it. Then you go in the room with the guy to figure out your A school. And I didn't know it. I think I kind of got suckered. I tell him I want to be an MR, and he shovels through some papers. He goes, oh, your eyesight's 20/40 uncorrected. He says, it's got to be 20/20 to be an MR.
Huh.
Well, I'm an 18-year kid. I don't know. So I go, okay, well then what can I be? And he looks around and he goes, well, you could be an engineman. I said, an engineman, what's that? He said, it's a diesel mechanic. I'm like, okay, yeah, I like working on my car. I could be a decent mechanic. Well, I didn't know the Navy was building all these FFGs at the time. I think they ended up building over 60 of them. And they needed a lot of enginemen. So I think I kind of got suckered, but it turned out for the best.
Yeah, I remember that process. Like, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I joined and I said, I want to be a SEAL. The guy didn't tell me I needed to go run 45 miles a week to be ready, right?
Right.
And guess what? I had a good ASVAB and he was sending me to deck. He goes, oh, it's the quickest way. Pick any job you want. It's great.
Yeah, that apprentice stuff, they really got a lot of gas with that.
Oh, yeah.
But,
so
I went,
go ahead, sir.
I just turned 15. It was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. So I went in the delayed entry program and went to my senior year of high school. And everybody, I was a small school. There was like maybe 100 kids in my graduating class. Everybody knew I'd already joined the Navy. Then about Christmas, I screwed up and fell in love.
Oh, yeah. Youth.
I met this gal who was 4 years older than me, and we hit it off right away. And first, we were going to get married after I got out of boot camp, and then I thought, man, if I get out of boot camp, they could send me anywhere in the world. So I told her, I said, maybe we better get married before I leave. So I literally graduated from high school on Friday night. We got married on Saturday morning, and then a week later, I left boot camp.
Wow. What a way to...
Yeah, it was busy summer.
What a way to start, huh? So where did you go to boot camp?
Great Lakes.
Me too.
I was in Company 138 in 1983.
Oh, wow.
Got up there in June. I think I got up there June 2nd. And went to boot camp. Then went over to the other side for my A school. And when you go to A school, they come in and they would tell you, hey, you got to sign up for a C school. And we're like, well, what's C school? And it's, well, it's advanced training. So everybody signs up for it. And get accepted into a C school is FFG Auxiliary Systems Pipeline is what it was called. And we there was three guys that they weren't in my company in boot camp, but we all graduated the same group. And we walk into the first day of C school class, and this chief walks up to us. He calls us out by name. And we're like, how's this guy know our name? You know? And he says, I'm going to be your chief when we get on board the ship. And we're like, okay, what ship are we going to? Because they don't tell you anything, you know? So it was ENC Doug Grady was his name. He was awesome chief. I learned so much from that man.
Wow.
He was he'd been on the Swift boats in Vietnam. He was quite a guy. But
good sea
he
daddy.
made sure we made the grades he wanted us to make in C school. When we got finished with C school, they sent the three of us to the pre-com unit, pre-commissioning unit in San Diego at 32nd Street Naval Station. I think Chief Grady, he went straight to Seattle, top Seattle, where the ship was being built. We got to the pre-com unit in San Diego. My wife and I, we rented an apartment down in Imperial Beach. We were in San Diego for about, 6 months.
Yeah.
Went to a lot of the little, fleet schools they would have there.
Yeah.
Little 1 week, 2 week schools.
Firefighting and stuff.
Yeah, firefighting, the damage control where they sled you out in the room. They found out I'd been a swim team and a lifeguard in high school, so they sent me to the pilot rescue school.
Wow.
Then about July, they said, okay, we're going to start sending the engineers up to the ship so you can start learning the ship. because we were supposed to commission November 24th. So we moved up to Seattle, and the Navy paid for us to rent apartments and furniture, and it was crazy. Since I was married, we rented something affordable because once we commissioned the ship, they would stop paying for it.
Yeah.
So we rented something that we'd be able to pay for on my salary. But the guys that were single that were just going to live on the ship, man, they were in really nice places. It was funny.
They were living it up.
That's right. That's right. So we would go to the shipyard every day, and we'd have quarters. And if you had there was a little Navy base. I'm sure it's closed now. It was up at the top of Lake Washington. It was called Sandpoint Naval Station.
Okay.
And there was medical and stuff up there. If you had something you had to go up there for, they'd cut you loose. Otherwise, we'd go over to the ship and just crawl around and learn the ship, talk with the yard birds. When the shipyard owned the ship, everything was unlocked. I got to go down in the sonar dome, the missile ring, and all these areas that once we commissioned the ship, a whole lot of padlocks started appearing real quick.
Yeah, a lot of compartmentalized clearance areas, pretty much,
Exactly.
right?
Right. But before we commissioned, man, we got to go everywhere. So we would explore the ship all day, and they would give us these, they call them tracing books. They were like line drawings of all the piping systems, and it would have the valves on there, but they weren't labeled, and we would crawl around and find each valve and write down what it was. It was a really good way just to learn our way around the ship, get really familiar with our systems.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of fun just screwing around with the yard birds. And they were good guys. They were just putting the finishing touches on it. Had to stand a lot of like fire watches if they were welding, that kind of stuff.
Did you get to do a lot of your swimming too because you became the rescue swimmer?
Well, what happened was we commissioned on November 24th. Once we took charge of the ship, we moved it over to the Coast Guard base in Seattle. And, of course, right then we're right up against the Christmas holidays, so they did the Christmas Liberty stuff. And when we got back from our Christmas and New Year's leaves, then we had to start getting ready for our write-off exams. You know, the Navy doesn't just give you the keys to the ship and let you go. They want to make sure you know how to drive it, operate it. So there was a group of officers came in, and they really put us through the ringer. And we had oral boards. They'd walk around with us and have us explain systems to them. They just wanted to make sure we understood what we were working on. One of the main things that I was involved with was there's a fire drill. And there were, I think, 6 of us enginemen. And all 6 of us were taking turns trying to do this fire drill. And you had to do it step by step. And every time we practiced it, somebody would screw up one of the steps.
Oh, my God.
There was one time, then, it like clicked with me, and I did it. And then after that, I could do it every time. So, of course, that means I got to be the one to do it for the inspection.
You could figure out the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
Quick question. Did you have to use halon down there or be ready to use it if there's an engine fire?
Yeah, we had halon canisters that were fixed in there, and when you went up to the escape hatch, there were key handles you would pull to release the halon, and that was actually part of the fire drill. Was you would, when the fire got out of control, you'd go up, shut the hatch, dog it down, and then release the halon, and then report to CCS and tell them you released halon. So,
yeah, that was a very dangerous chemical, but you need it for that type of high heat, high combustion type fire. And it's funny that you're hearing this from a signalman, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got plenty of firefighting training, so I remember the halon systems, and
Right.
I remember on flight deck we would use AFFF, and
Yep.
usually the salt water throughout the typical passageways, or depending, what depending on where the fire may have broken out, what type of fire it might be, right? So yeah,
Right.
and I knew that carried on every ship. So it's interesting that you were the lifeguard and the swimmer, because so was I. But I never tried to be that guy. And then when I did swim quals in the Philippines, they're like, "Damn, you should be a diver or something else, or a SEAL or something." Because I just smoked everybody. I'm like, I haven't even trained in years. What? But all those years stick with you, all that swim training. But
Yeah.
my other friend who later became a swick boat operator, he was the ship swimmer. So, and he's a surfer, and he still surfs today. And so he was a perfect choice for it. Anyways, it didn't matter. I don't need to compete with him. He's a stud.
Well, what they did with us was there was me, and then there was I think it was a quartermaster, and we had both went through the training down in San Diego, and we get up to Seattle. Well, they give us a voucher and send us to a dive shop to get some dive gear, get the wetsuit and fins and mask and all that. And then after we had commissioned the ship and moved over to the Coast Guard base there in January, the same instructors that had taught us the class down in San Diego flew up to Seattle, and we had to put the motor whaleboat in the water, and we had to take turns jumping in the harbor there in Seattle in January.
Nice warm water.
Yeah, it was nasty, oily water, about 34 degrees, and
Yeah.
here we are jumping in there and rescuing Oscar.
Were you wearing dry suits? I mean, that's hypothermic water.
No, we were just wearing they were just wetsuits. They didn't really tell us what to get. They just gave us a voucher and said, "Go find a dive shop and buy your gear." It was crazy.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's like people were just learning about some of the lethal aspects of hypothermia, how fast it can jump on you diving into that cold of water. Some people would have a heart attack diving into that cold of water. Pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
But you survived.
Yeah, sure.
You're here.
Yeah. But I did probably rescue for a good 2 years. Then after we commissioned the ship, whenever we'd go to flight quarters, I'd go up and the gear locker was up on the O3 level, up on the top of the ship, and I'd go up, strip down, and put my wetsuit on, and a lot of the time I'd go stand in the back of the bridge, stand back there by the chart table, and just watch what was going on. They just wanted us close to the motor whaleboat. That way, if something would happen, we'd be there to go in the water. But I enjoyed it. That was about the only time I got to see the sunlight, being a snipe.
Yeah, the other snipe said the same thing. He said, "You never saw us. We were always under the under the water line." And
Right.
so you get that. You also get that hazard duty pay for flight quarters. True, right?
I don't know if I got that or not. I don't remember that.
Or any dive pay. I got it for being a proximity hot suitman, like the guys that were on that other podcast where they rescued the helo. That was my job too.
Yeah. That was great.
Yeah, that was a pretty crazy story. So you were on the Vandergrift, which was an FFG.
Right. FFG 40.
So did you do some wall walking? Was that thing pretty rough out at sea, being a smaller boat, probably getting knocked around out there in the big waves sometimes?
Yeah, probably the worst we were ever in was the first time when we left Seattle to take it down to Long Beach. That was in February, and once we got out of the Straits and into the Northern Pacific, we were walking on the walls, but we didn't have the fin stabilizers yet.
Oh wow!
After we'd been commissioned for 6 months, we went back in for a yard availability into Todd Long Beach, and they put in the fin stabilizer units. That really helped smooth the ship out. You didn't get near the rolls then.
I bet that must have been a rough ride.
Yeah, it was. And here's that was my very first time out to sea. And I was stuck on a port and starboard watch. It was me and a second-class engineman, and he was supposed to be standing the watch, and I was just supposed to be like in training. Well, he went out the night before he left and got loaded. So we'd go on watch. We'd go down to AMR3, and he'd lay down on the deck plate, hand me the clipboard, and I'd go take all the readings, and then go back and get him so we could report back in. It was pretty funny. I knew the watch because I'd been training for it for 6 months.
Yeah.
But
after
I did that,
good.
After I did that, Dave and I were pretty tight.
I bet you helped him out. My former SM2 was on I believe an FFG as well, the Kurtz.
Yeah.
And it was commissioning around the same time yours was. They were out of San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Who knows? You guys were all getting these ships ready to rock and roll back then.
Yeah.
Did you take any? Did you do any Westpacks or any major world cruises or anything after everything was running?
Yeah, in '87, we left in January. We were going to go on our world cruise. We were going to follow the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. The Kitty Hawk was going to go in the yards in Norfolk. We were going to escort her around the world, and then when she went to Norfolk, we were going to drop down, go through the Panama Canal, and then come back up to Long Beach. Well, we got, I think, 2 days out of port, and Iran and Iraq started fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So we got orders to go straight to the Persian Gulf. Well, on the way over, we were doing an underway replenishment, taking on fuel, and we ruptured a fuel tank. So they let us pull into the Philippines for 2 days to make some emergency repairs. So that was my first experience of Subic Bay.
Oh, yeah.
That was a crazy place.
Yeah, it sure was. I lived there for a couple months. Our ship magically broke down when we got near the Philippines.
I think a lot of ships get that.
Yeah, we all, somebody alluded like it's just like it's like the Bermuda Triangle. It just happens. The rudder's broken.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
by the time I got to the Philippines, I'd already been married 3 years and I had a daughter, so I had to behave myself. But it was still a fun place.
Oh yeah, the drinking and going out and the music and all that's a great time, man.
Right.
But that's a pretty interesting place. It's no longer there, Subic Bay. What other ports did you guys end up hitting?
Let's see. We pulled into Karachi, Pakistan, which was not a very pretty place.
No. I mean, if you think the Philippines is third world, that was probably fifth world, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It was. Then we went down to Mombasa, Kenya, and when we're going down there, that's when we crossed the equator, so I got to go through the shellback initiation.
I'm wondering if you guys weren't in the same battle group as the Mountain Hood, who was supposed to be on a world cruise at the same time that year, I believe.
Yeah,
and I know that
it was. I bet it was with the Kitty Hawk.
Yeah, it's very possible. We'll have to figure that out as the stories, because I'm finding we're all 1 degree of separation away from each other. Like I sometimes call it walking in each other's shadows. Like strange example, I grew up overseas, and I always say this on the podcast. All listeners are like, oh, he says it again. Anyways, my friend from high school on the Army base I grew up on joined the Air Force, and he was stationed up close to Sacramento in Fairfield or something. And I was stationed in San Francisco. So I knew he would come to San Francisco for the nightlife because it was a lot more interesting than Fairfield. So we talked years later. I'm like, oh, we were probably at the same nightclub and didn't know each other was on the opposite side.
Yeah.
Such a funny thing. So was that your one and only because you spent so much time getting the ship ready?
Yeah.
Good?
And actually, I was wanting to stay in the Navy. You know, I enjoyed it, but I had a wife and a kid, and I wanted to, you know, not be out to sea all the time.
Right.
So one of the guys I worked with, one of the electricians mate, he'd been a recruiter. He was telling me about recruiting duty, so I went and talked to the recruiting detailer, and he's like, "Oh yeah," he goes, "I'm from Indiana. He goes, I can put you in Lafayette, which is only like a half hour away from where I grew up." So then I had to go talk to the instrument detailer because I still had like a year of sea duty I had to do. Well, he wouldn't let me out of my sea duty, which I said, "That's okay. Then put me on one of the reserve FFGs here in Long Beach." He says, "Well, no, you'll have to go down to San Diego." Well, that meant we would have had to, you know, find a new apartment, and my wife would have to quit her job and find a new job. And I said, if we're going to do all that, we're just going to go back home to Indiana.
Yeah.
So I made my decision to get out. So when we got the ship to Mombasa, Kenya, I left the ship there. They put me on an Air Force transport, and we flew to Diego Garcia. Spent 2 days on Diego Garcia. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like Gilligan's Island.
I've heard of it. It's just like a nondescript artificial destination that's just military land, right?
Yeah, it's owned by the British, but the only thing there was I think an Air Force base and a little naval base. But it's just like it's white sands. There's old cannons left over from World War II. It was a neat place to just stop in and see.
Yeah.
And then from there, we flew. They put me on a C-5, that huge transport the Air Force has.
Yeah.
That was cool to get to fly on one of those. We flew back into QB Point in the Philippines and spent another weekend in the Philippines there in Subic Bay. And then on Monday morning, we took a bus up to Clark and got on I think it was a Hawaiian Airlines flight out of Clark. And we stopped, I think, in one or two islands on the way back. Stopped in Hawaii, landed in Hawaii at midnight, and took off at 8 in the morning.
Interesting.
So I can stay up into Honolulu, but I was only there for 8 hours.
So that was when you were processing out of the Navy. It just didn't. Sometimes that happens to guys. Like they could make a great career of it, but depending on their rate, depending on availability of billets, depending on their family, so many moving parts. I mean, if you're single, great, but if you're married, that changes a lot of things. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and
exactly.
I know people. It's definitely. It's either stay married or get out of the Navy, right? One of those things.
Yeah.
You know. So did you find that your training helped you? How many years did you do total?
Well, I did 4 years of active duty, and on a FFG, you know, it's a small ship, only had about 210 guys. And the enginemen, we were kind of like the maintenance men of the ship. I mean, we took care of the air compressors, the refrigeration, the ACs, of course, the diesel generators, a lot of equipment that we just did perform the maintenance on. So when I got out and came back home, I got a job working in a factory as industrial maintenance, and that's pretty much what I've done for the last 30-some years is industrial maintenance. I'm actually more of an electrician now than anything, but
wow,
I wouldn't be doing this at all if it hadn't been for the Navy and the training they gave me.
What a change. That's interesting. You got to see, you're one of the guys whose rate actually crossed over to the civilian world, which is nice. You know, for me, I was a signalman. There was nothing I was going to do when I get out. Nothing. Maybe wave the checkered flag at the Daytona 500, you know. Or the Indy. Yeah. Oh, it's a flag guy. We hired him out of the Navy. He's good with the flag. Have you kept in touch with many of your shipmates?
I have in recent years since Facebook come about. We've got a Facebook group for the Vandergrift, and managed to reconnect with several of the guys that I served with, and a lot of guys that were on there after me, and it's been good. Trading pictures and getting to catch up on each other's lives a little bit. You know, we're all spread out across the country. Probably the closest shipmate of mine, Bill Haycraft's down in Kentucky, so he's about 4 hours away. There's a guy that was on the Vandergrift after me. He lives in Fort Wayne, which is about an hour away. But that's one of the good things about Facebook is we've been able to reconnect a little bit.
Oh yeah, it's helped with the podcast, but the podcast is getting found in other places too. And you know, it's interesting. Like for me, I stayed in San Francisco, where my ship. I basically get off. I get out on a medical discharge. I had a motorcycle wreck, so I spent a year at Oak Knoll Naval Hospital on limited duty. And then I just said, I want out of here, you know. So they gave me a medical honorable discharge. And, shore duty wasn't everything, wasn't as exciting as I thought it would be. I get stuck working in a mail room, which is so much less of what I was trained to do. Not that I put down the mail guy. That's a lot of hard work, man. You know, it's what you chose to do. But, your job is something you could use when you get out. And, for me, I stayed here, and then I find out there's about 10 other guys, and we've all been walking around and not running into each other. So now we hang out usually once a month. We have a meetup, and we go have lunch on a weekend and stuff, and it's great to see everybody. And it just reminds you, Go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, I've tried to stay connected with the military a little bit. I'm a member of the American Legion Post. I was an adjutant at one time. A lot of those guys are the older Vietnam era guys, but it's fun just to have some military guys you can go hang out and kind of speak the same language.
Yeah, it sticks with you. It's when you're young, you kind of can't wait to get out of it. When you get older, you wish you were back in it, and I didn't know what they meant by that. I'm like, yeah, whatever. For almost 20 years, I'm like, you can keep your little metal bed and that mop and all these other things, and now
I'd love to go back for it. For a week.
Wouldn't that be great? Just to
that'd be a blast.
Kind of like that movie Battleship, where they get all those old guys to shoot the alien, and they're using the battleship.
I love that scene when all those guys pop up in their old dungarees.
Yep.
That brings a tear to your eye.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, this movie guy got it figured out. It's a strange context, but yeah. What do you think your favorite part of the Navy was?
That's a good question. I enjoyed, when I was on Westpac and like places like the Philippines and just the history, because, I'm kind of a history buff, so going through that area where, World War II went on and just thinking about, what happened where I'm standing.
Right.
I enjoyed a lot of that kind of stuff. And like I said earlier, my chief most of the time, Ian C. Grady, he and I had a war officer, Pat Clark, I think was his name.
Mm-hmm.
They would take their time and, work with, teach you stuff. I've learned, I still use stuff today in my maintenance job that I learned in the Navy.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget one time when I was getting out, I told Mr. Clark that I was getting out. He said, well, he predicted it then. He said, you'll end up doing maintenance somewhere. And he said, you'll be the kind of guy that puts that extra shot of grease in something or takes time to wipe something down. And I've always kept that in the back of my head. I can hear him saying that. So I've always tried to do my job as consciously as I can and keep the machinery running.
I totally understand that. It's I've been hanging out with my former SM2 Dalton, who's my LPO, and he basically, you know, he and I have a high level of accountability, this follow through. So we've been doing some things together, and everything is just like lightning. It's sharp, like when we were in the signal bridge doing communications out at sea. You couldn't make an error. You did it. You did it fast. You did what you said, and you said what you did. You know what I mean? And when I see that, I didn't see a lot of that going into the civilian world because not everybody had that same level of accountability, right? It just depends where they grew up, and you kind of, maybe later as they mature, like we get out of the Navy at 25 and we're looking around and we're going, when are these guys going to get it? And then later, maybe in their 30s, they've figured it out. They picked up that standard work ethic, right? Unless they had a boss or a manager that had been in the Navy or was a former Marine or something who led by example, right? I'm sure.
Right, yeah, we started getting that training day one in boot camp, that pay attention to detail.
Right.
They pounded that into us real quick.
Oh yeah, that's come out in my life, is to be consistent, to do, just to be on time, all that. That's been my ethics ever since, and it's definitely a positive thing to carry out here in our civilian life. But which of the podcasts have you listened to? You were telling me you listened to the Hilo crash, right?
Yeah, I just listened to that one. That was a great one.
Mudbone.
I'm just quite a few of the ones where you're talking to different guys that you served with on the Mount Hood. I can't remember them all, but
yeah,
it's just fun to listen to hear guys tell sea stories. I love telling my old sea stories.
Oh yeah.
Nobody really understands them because I'm not with any Navy guys, so.
Yeah, you might as well be talking about that one time you were on Mars.
Right.
You're sitting there with the civilian.
Eyes kind of glaze over.
That's why I'm trying to give our sea story some legs because, we former, we veterans, we understand it, we respect it, we miss it, we want to hear some of it, we want to get back into the memory bank, and that's what helps, But I really.
That's why, you've been talking in the last few podcasts about these collisions that the Navy's been having, and it's unimaginable to us guys that served back in the '80s. How is this happening?
Right. We had that high level of situational awareness and that higher level of accountability. But we also, and I break it down every other podcast that I talk with someone like you or another guy that's in or out. It's like we didn't have the digital distraction of a cell phone, the warm little blanket that just sucks you into it hypnotically, and you're not paying attention to the rest of your periphery and your 360, right? So, people are sitting there. You could be down in the engine room watching some YouTube video on your phone, and all of a sudden, steam's leaking out of a pipe or something that shouldn't be or whatever. Not that I'm familiar with that workspace like you guys are, but you know what I mean? Hey, did you see that thermometer jump? Did you notice that we're redlining right now? Wait, let me watch this video about this dog attacking a donkey. And that's what go ahead.
I was the kind of sailor, I always had a paperback book in my back pocket that, I'd put the book down and do my job. I wasn't distracted by a digital device or something like that.
Yeah. And it's like I could, part of me wanted to be just roar and be the angry old man. Back when I was a guy, I used to walk to school and 8 miles with 6 packs of ice on my shoulders, weighing 900 pounds, and I used to eat grasshoppers right out of the grass. Now, that's a strange old guy, but anyways, I'm painting in a picture of exaggeration. But I have a kid, and my daughter's 13, and she's growing up in a generation where everybody's like, "Here, have a computer. Here, have a computer."
Right.
I mean,
well, I've got
Go ahead.
I've got 3 kids, and they're all millennials, so
Yeah.
I see how it is. You sit there and visit with them the whole time they got the phone in their hand, they're doing stuff.
Right.
And I'm getting to be somewhat that way now myself, but
It's hard to resist.
it is. It's very, very hard to do.
Well, I like to communicate, and I got to build the podcast, so I have to find everybody where they're hanging out. Where are they hanging out? They're hanging out on Facebook. They're hanging out on the podcast. So in order to build the podcast, it's kind of easy fishing. But and then some people, to get them to have a conversation, hell, that's a little bit of a hard thing to ask because they're so used to texting.
Right.
I mean,
they'll text you a conversation.
Right. I mean, we're losing our handwriting and cursive writing skills. So because we're typing, right?
Right. Yeah.
What's next? We're going to learn how to talk. We're going to just send each other little emojis.
Yeah. Oh, I hope not.
Well, it was awesome having you on as a guest, and I hope you keep listening to our podcasts. And another shipmate. And if any of your friends from your ship would like to come on board, I'd be glad to have them. Tell me more about life on a frigate. It's a pretty interesting story. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. It was a fun 4 years, and I'll spread the word out about the podcast and see if we can get some more guys listening.
That would be great.
And I appreciate you doing it, and it's been really cool to get to hear some sea stories and hear from guys that were in about the same time I was in. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to get us 70s and 80s guys keep our stories alive. Back when life was a lot more random. You couldn't predict it based on who's showing up at the birthday party based on their Facebook. Yeah, I'm showing up.
Yeah.
Life was more full of mystery back then.
Yeah, two of my favorite movies, Top Gun, not because I like Tom Cruise, but because that's like the Navy I was in.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if you've ever seen, oh gosh, now I forget the name of it. It's a Kirk Douglas sci-fi movie where the aircraft carrier gets sent back in time.
Were they? It's the one, The Final Countdown. That one?
Yeah, Final Countdown.
I watched that. I watched that the other day.
Yeah, that was our Navy, man. It was the ships, the planes, everything. That was uniforms. That was our Navy.
Yeah, Top Gun was hot when I came out. I went to the EM Club in San Diego, and I guess that's where they filmed part of the movie.
I
was like, why does this feel like Top Gun? Everyone's in their whites. Where's Val Kilmer and his flat top? It's so funny. You watch the movie, you look up to the movie stars like they're heroes. Like they were really there. They make you believe, but the truth is they were never there. Not all of, most of them weren't. There were some movie stars that served, but I mean, it's funny. I've met Clint Eastwood. He was in the military, but he spent most of his time as a lifeguard. He did have an action-packed moment, though. He was on a Mac flight that crashed somewhere near San Francisco off the bay, and they had to swim to shore. So it's funny how that works. But like I said, once again, thank you for coming on. And if you guys are looking for more podcasts, you can find us on AEC Stories on Podbean or AEC Stories on iTunes or on Stitcher or even on Spotify.